Texas is a land of tall tales. We like our stories big, we like our legends loud, and we like our history written in bold, confident letters. But there is one story, one specific Tuesday in April, that the state of Texas tried very hard to forget. If you drive out to the Edwards Plateau today, that vast, high, lonely stretch of limestone hills west of San Antonio, you will hear the wind. It's a constant companion. It whistles through the cedar trees. It rattles the barbed wire fences, and it whispers over the empty canyons. It sounds peaceful, but if you listen closely, if you really tune out the modern world and listen to the frequency of that wind, you might hear something else. You might hear a piano playing ragtime. You might hear the laughter of children chasing a stray dog down Main Street. You might hear the clinking of coins in a bank vault that held more wealth per capita than almost anywhere else in the United States. You are hearing ghosts. Because on April 12, 1927, in the span of exactly 4 minutes, a force of nature generated more kinetic energy than an atomic bomb and dropped it directly onto a town that thought it was untouchable. They didn't call it a tornado. Survivors, the ones who could still speak after the shock, they called it the Black Fog. It didn't look like a funnel. It looked like the horizon itself had decided to stand up, walk forward, and swallow the earth. This isn't just a story about weather. This is a story about hubris, about the fragility of the walls we build to keep us safe. Welcome to Rocksprings. Let's go back, not to the ruin, but to the glory. Imagine it's the morning of April 12th, 1927. The Roaring Twenties are in full swing. If you were standing in the middle of the Rocksprings town square, you wouldn't feel like you were in a dusty Texas outpost. You would feel like you were standing on top of the world. And geographically, you almost were. Rocksprings sits at an elevation of 2,400 feet. It is the highest point on the Edwards Plateau. To get there, you have to drive up and up and up, navigating treacherous canyon roads that wind their way out of the lowlands. It was a fortress, a town built in the clouds. Because of this elevation, the people of Rocksprings believed a myth, a deadly, seductive myth. They believed they were immune to tornadoes. Old-timers would sit on the porch of the Ballantine Hotel and tell you, with absolute certainty, tornadoes can't climb mountains. They break up in the canyons. We are too high. We are too safe. And for a long time, they were right. Rocksprings was booming. It was known as the Mohair Capital of the world. Thousands of Angora goats grazed on the rocky plateau, and their wool was turning this small town into a financial powerhouse. The sheer amount of money flowing through the First National Bank was staggering. Picture the scene. It's 10 a.m. The sun is shining, but it's warm. Not just warm, it's sticky. The air feels heavy, like a wet wool blanket draped over your shoulders. Sheriff Jordan is walking his beat, nodding to the shopkeepers. The smell of fresh coffee drifts out of the cafes. The brand new courthouse, a beautiful, stately structure made of brick and mortar, stands proud in the center of town. It looks permanent. It looks like it will last for 1,000 years. Inside the telephone exchange, the operators are busy plugging in lines, connecting the isolated ranchers to the outside world. That copper wire is their only lifeline. If that line goes down, Rocksprings is an island in the sky. Everything is perfect. Everything is profitable. But nature doesn't care about your profit margins. Nature doesn't care about your brick courthouse. And nature was cooking up something that had never been seen before. Now, look at the map. April 12th. The meteorology of this day was wrong. It was fundamentally wrong for this time of year. Usually, the high plateau is dry, crisp. But on this day, a massive tongue of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico had surged inland. It crawled up the escarpment, rising 2,000 feet, and it pooled over Rocksprings. At the same time, a cold, dry air mass was racing down from the Rockies. These two invisible giants were on a collision course, and Rocksprings was the meeting point. But there was a third player, the cap. In weather terms, a cap is a layer of warm air sitting on top of the atmosphere. It acts like a lid on a pot of boiling water. It holds the energy down. It prevents storms from forming. For most of the day, that lid held tight. The pressure built and built and built. The humidity in Rocksprings hit near 100%. People were sweating through their shirts just sitting still. The air was so thick you felt like you had to chew it before you could breathe it. Animals felt it first. Ranchers later reported that the goats, usually stubborn and loud, went silent. Dogs crawled under porches and refused to come out. Horses stood facing the southeast, nostrils flaring, smelling something that humans couldn't detect. They were smelling the ozone. They were smelling the change in the electromagnetic charge of the air. By 4 p.m., the sky began to change. It didn't turn gray. It didn't turn black. It turned green. Not a dark forest green. Survivors described it as a sickly, bruised olive, a color that shouldn't exist in nature. It was the color of a deep sea trench, suspended over the Texas hill country. Imagine looking up and seeing that, a ceiling of bruised green light. This was the cap breaking. The lid had blown off the pot, and the energy that had been cooking all day was suddenly, violently released. Clouds began to explode upward. In minutes, they towered 40,000, 50,000 feet into the air. These weren't just thunderheads. These were supercells, rotating monsters that feed on their own energy. But in town, the mood was still strangely casual. Why? Because of the myth. Tornadoes don't climb mountains. People looked at the green sky and said, "Looks like we're in for a hailstorm, maybe some heavy rain. Good for the grass, good for the goats." They went about their dinners. They put their children to bed. The local theater was preparing to open its doors for the evening show. Families gathered around the radio. They were inside the fortress on the hill. They were safe. At 7 p.m., the sun began to set behind that wall of clouds. The light died quickly. The green faded into a murky, suffocating gray. And then the wind stopped. Completely. The flags on Main Street hung limp. The trees froze. The dust settled on the roads. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind of silence that feels like a predator holding its breath before the pounce. The barometer in the drugstore, if anyone had looked at it, was bottoming out. The needle was falling so fast it was almost vibrating. The pressure of the entire atmosphere was dropping. 7:45 p.m., the silence breaks, but not with wind. It starts with a clack, then another. Clack, clack, hail. But this isn't normal hail. This is ice forged in the sub-zero upper atmosphere of a supercell that is spinning at over 100 miles per hour. It hits the tin roofs of the storefronts like a gunshot. Bang, then another. Bang. People rush to the windows. They see white stones bouncing off the pavement. But they aren't stones. They are jagged chunks of ice. First, the size of marbles. Then, the size of hen eggs. Then, the size of baseballs. The noise becomes deafening. A roar of millions of ice projectiles smashing into the town. Windows shatter, crash. Car windshields implode. Livestock caught in the open are knocked unconscious or killed instantly. Inside the houses, the terror begins. Parents grab their children. Get under the bed. Get away from the windows. The roar of the hail is so loud you have to scream to be heard by the person standing next to you. It sounds like a machine gun assault on the city. For 10 minutes, Rocksprings is pummeled. The ground turns white. It looks like snow, but it's a field of ice bullets. And then, at 7:50 p.m., just as quickly as it started, it stops. The last hailstone rolls into the gutter. The roar fades, and the silence returns. But this silence is different. The air feels thin. It feels vacuumed out. If you take a breath, it feels like there isn't enough oxygen in the room. Survivors, peering out from under their tables, looking out at the white streets, think it's over. That was a bad one, they think. The roof is damaged, the crops are ruined, but we made it. People start to stand up. They brush the glass off their clothes. They move toward the front doors to assess the damage. They open the doors to the cool, damp air. They look to the southwest. It's dark now, Pitch black. You can't see the mountains. You can't see the horizon. But you can hear it. It's faint at first. A low vibration. You feel it in the soles of your feet before you hear it in your ears. It gets louder. Rumble. It sounds like a freight train, a heavy, loaded cargo train moving at full speed. But here's the thing that makes the blood in your veins turn to ice. Rocksprings doesn't have a railroad. There are no tracks on this mountain. There is no train coming to Rocksprings. The sound grows. It stops being a rumble and starts being a roar. It's a bass frequency so deep it rattles the teeth in your skull. Roar! The sheriff steps out onto the boardwalk. He looks into the darkness, and suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminates the world, and he sees it. It's not a funnel. It's not a rope. The entire southern horizon is a wall of rotating black fog. It is 1 mile wide. It is churning with trees, barns, and the debris of the valley below. It isn't coming for the town. It is already on the town. The train isn't passing. The train is derailing directly into your living room. There is no siren. There is no warning system. There is only the realization, in the final 3 seconds, that the fortress on the hill is made of paper. The sheriff turns to run inside. He grabs the door handle, and the world dissolves. The sheriff is standing at the door. His hand is on the brass knob. In a normal storm, you have time to react. You see the rain slant. You hear the wind howl. Your brain processes the danger, calculates a path, and sends a signal to your legs to run. But this is not a normal storm. This is a wedge, a grinding wheel of atmospheric pressure 1 mile wide. It is moving at 40 miles per hour across the ground. But inside the vortex, the wind is spinning at speeds that human beings in 1927 cannot even comprehend. 260 miles per hour. That is faster than a Formula One car. That is faster than a bullet train. That is the speed of a projectile, not a wind. When the sheriff's hand touches that knob, the pressure outside the door is so much lower than the pressure inside the house that the house itself becomes a bomb. It doesn't blow down. It blows out. Snap. The sound isn't a crash. It's the sound of structural failure. Every nail in the door frame gives up at the exact same millisecond. The wood doesn't splinter. It disintegrates. The sheriff is thrown backward, not by the wind, but by the exploding air from his own living room rushing out to meet the vacuum of the tornado. He hits the back wall, and then the back wall is gone. He is airborne. Now, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine the sound. Survivors always talk about the freight train, but that's because they didn't have jet engines in 1927. If they had heard a 747 taking off, that is what they would have compared it to. But multiply that by 1,000. It is a scream, a mechanical, grinding, tearing scream. It is the sound of thousands of oak trees being snapped in half simultaneously. It is the sound of brick mortar turning to powder. It is the sound of the earth itself being sandblasted. The darkness is absolute. The electricity was cut seconds ago. The only light comes from the funnel itself. Yes, the funnel is glowing. It's not fire, it's friction. The wind is moving so fast, and it is carrying so much dust and sand and debris that it is generating static electricity on a massive scale. The tornado is illuminated from the inside by a constant strobe light, flickering of blue and green lightning. It looks like a neon nightmare, and inside that nightmare are the people of Rocksprings. Let's go into the terrified mind of a mother, Mrs. Whitaker. She is huddled in her kitchen with her 2 children. They are under the heavy oak dining table. This is what she feels. First, her ears pop, painfully, like a needle being driven into the eardrum. The pressure drop is so severe that it feels like her head is being squeezed in a vice. Then, the smell. It smells like ozone, sharp, metallic, like chewing on tin foil. It smells like pine sap from the thousands of trees being pulverized, and it smells like dirt, ancient, dry dirt dug up from 10 feet underground. She holds her children tight. She screams, "I love you!" But she can't hear her own voice. The roar washes everything out. It vibrates her chest cavity. It shakes her bones. And then, the floor begins to move, not shake, move. The nails holding the floorboards to the joists are screaming as they are ripped out. The house isn't collapsing. It is being lifted. The laws of gravity have been suspended. The laws of physics have been rewritten. For a terrifying second, Mrs. Whitaker and her children, and the table, and the floor, are floating. They are suspended in the center of the room, weightless, surrounded by a swirling cloud of glass shards, plates, and furniture. And then, the house detonates. If you are listening to this, you might think you know what wind feels like. You've stuck your hand out of a car window on the highway. You feel the resistance. Now, imagine putting your hand out of a car window at 300 miles per hour. The air becomes solid. It doesn't flow around you. It hits you like a brick wall. In the center of Rocksprings, the white fury is doing things that seem impossible. This is the grinder. A tornado of this magnitude acts like a giant blender. It doesn't just knock things over, it shreds them. Let's look at the biology of the trauma. Survivors found after the storm had straw, pieces of dry grass, driven into telephone poles like nails. They found chickens, still alive, but completely plucked of their feathers. The wind speed was so high that the follicles simply couldn't hold on. This is what happens to the human body in an F5. It is gruesome. But we must look at it to understand the horror. The air is filled with debris, not just wood, but sand, dirt, gravel, moving at bullet speeds. If you are caught outside, you are being sandblasted. The skin is scoured raw. Clothing is ripped off the body instantly. There is a story, a dark legend from that night, of a man found 3 miles away. He was untouched, no broken bones, but his pockets were full of mud. The wind had forced mud into his pockets against the fabric, but hadn't torn the pants. The capriciousness of the wind is the most terrifying part. The tornado moves down Main Street. It approaches the Ballantine Hotel. The hotel is a sturdy building, 2 stories, stone. It has stood through storms for decades. Inside, guests are huddled in the lobby. They are praying. The tornado doesn't care about stone. It hits the corner of the building. Crack, boom. The entire second floor is sheared off. It doesn't fall down. It flies away. Beds, dressers, guests are launched into the night sky like leaves. But, and here is the mystery, on the first floor, on a small table in the lobby, a kerosene lamp is burning. The walls fall, the roof flies away, the windows explode, but the lamp sits there. The flame flickers, but does not go out. How? It's the chaos of the vortex, sub-vortices, tiny, intense tornadoes inside the main tornado spinning in opposite directions. One suction spot rips a tree out of the ground by its roots, while 5 feet away, a flower pot is left undisturbed. It is a game of Russian roulette played with the atmosphere, and everyone in Rocksprings has a gun to their head. Let's go to the dance hall. It's Tuesday. It wasn't packed, but there were people there. The band had stopped playing when the hail started. They are huddled in the corner. The roof of the dance hall is a large, clear span structure. It acts like a wing. As the wind passes over it, the pressure lifts it up in one piece. Survivors describe looking up and seeing the night sky, the lightning flashing, the green clouds swirling, right where the ceiling used to be. Then, the walls collapse inward. This is where the death toll climbs. This is where the tragedy becomes a statistic. Bricks, thousands of bricks, falling from 20 feet up. People are buried. They are pinned. And the noise, that train noise, is still roaring. It feels like it has been an hour, but it has only been 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Can you hold your breath for 90 seconds? Try it. Now imagine holding your breath while your house dissolves around you, while the air pressure sucks the oxygen out of your lungs, while the darkness screams. It is an eternity. In the middle of this apocalypse, there is one object that refuses to yield: the First National Bank. It is the symbol of the town's wealth. The reason Rocksprings exists: the Mohair Capital. The building is beautiful. Large glass windows, ornate brickwork, high ceilings. When the tornado hits the bank, it hits it with the force of a battering ram. The glass turns to dust instantly. The desks are sucked out into the street. The paperwork, deeds, loans, letters, cash, is sucked up into the funnel. But in the back of the bank stands the vault. Steel, concrete, reinforced, built to stop robbers, built to stop fire. The tornado rages against it. It claws at the steel door with fingers of wind. It hammers it with flying cars. It piles rubble against it. But the vault stays. Inside that vault is money, gold, silver, the life savings of the town. Outside that vault is the end of the world. There is a cruel irony here. The things we value most, the cold, hard cash, the gold, is safe. It is perfectly protected. But the soft things, the warm things, the people, the children, the flesh and blood, are defenseless. The tornado tears the bank building apart around the vault. It strips the bricks away until the vault is standing naked in the rain. A gray metal box in a field of ruin. It is a tombstone for the town's ambition. We are now at minute 3. The tornado is at its maximum width, 1 mile wide. It covers almost the entire residential section of the town. There is no safe side of the storm anymore. The entire town is inside the blender. The debris ball, the cloud of stuff swirling around the bottom of the tornado, is now so thick that it is acting like a solid object. It is a meat grinder. Trees are debarked. Cars are wrapped around telephone poles like aluminum foil. A Model T Ford is lifted, carried 2 blocks, and dropped through the roof of a church. The sensory overload is complete. Survivors describe a state of shock where the brain simply shuts down. They stop hearing the roar. They stop feeling the pain. They just exist. They wait. They wait to die. Or they wait to wake up. There is a story of a man who was blown out of his house. He landed in a prickly pear cactus patch. In normal life, falling into a cactus is agony, but he didn't feel it. He just lay there, watching the lightning illuminate the monster that had just eaten his home. He watched his own roof spin by. He watched his neighbor's bed frame tumble through the air. He said later it looked like a war movie, like artillery shelling. But in war, the shelling stops. In war, you can surrender. You cannot surrender to the wind. You cannot negotiate with a vortex. It takes what it wants, and it wants everything. The schoolhouse, gone. The Masonic Lodge, gone. The cafes, gone. 235 buildings. Let that number sink in. 235 out of 247. More than 90% of the town is not just damaged. It is erased. It is scrubbed from the map. If you looked at an aerial photo from the day before and compared it to what was happening now, you wouldn't recognize the geometry of the streets. The landmarks are gone. The reference points are gone. If you are trying to crawl to your neighbor's house for help, you can't find it because the house isn't there, and neither is the street. You are crawling through a wasteland of splinters and mud. Minute 4. The train is leaving the station. The tornado, having consumed the town, continues to the southeast. It moves toward the edge of the plateau, toward the canyons. The roar begins to fade. It doesn't stop instantly. It recedes, like a monster satisfied with its meal, walking away into the darkness. Roar, rumble, and then silence. But it is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of the void. The wind drops, the air hangs still, and then the rain comes back, but not the hail, and not the gentle spring rain. This is a deluge, a cold, freezing, torrential downpour. Nature's cruelest joke. After stripping the clothes off the survivors, after tearing the roofs off their heads, it dumps freezing water on them. The temperature plummets. The cap that broke earlier had held back the cold front. Now, the cold front rushes in. The temperature drops 20 degrees in minutes. The survivors are lying in the mud, wet, bleeding, shocked, and now they are shivering. Imagine the soundscape now. 5 minutes ago, it was the loudest sound on Earth. Now, it is terrifyingly quiet. No birds, no cars, no electricity hum. Just the sound of rain hitting broken lumber. Pat, pat, pat. And then, slowly, the first sound of humanity returns. A cough, a moan, a child crying for its mother, a scream of a name. Mary! Mary! The voices rise up from the rubble. At first, just one or two. Then, a chorus of pain. They are in total darkness. The moon is blocked by the clouds. The streetlights are gone. They cannot see their own hands in front of their faces. They have to navigate this hellscape by touch, by sound. Over here! I'm over here! Help me! I can't move my legs. Is anyone there? The smell of gas begins to drift through the air. Broken lines, the smell of wet plaster, the smell of blood. The white fury has passed. The event is over. The clock on the pile of bricks that used to be the courthouse is stopped. The hands are frozen. 7:55 p.m. The 4 minutes that erased Rocksprings are over. But the night, the longest night, has just begun. The wind has stopped. The monster has moved on to the canyons. But now, the survivors face a new enemy. An enemy just as deadly as the vortex, but far more cruel because it is slow. The cold. You have to remember the physics we talked about in Act 1. The cap broke. The warm air exploded upward, and the cold front from the Rockies rushed in to fill the vacuum. In the span of 15 minutes, the temperature in Rocksprings has dropped from a humid 75 degrees to a bone-chilling 40 degrees. And it is raining, hard. Imagine the physiology of the survivors. They are in shock. Their adrenaline is crashing. They are soaking wet. Their clothes have been torn off by the wind. They are lying in mud. Hypothermia begins to set in almost immediately. And it is dark. Not just nighttime dark. We are talking about a total blackout on a cloudy night with no moon, miles from civilization. It is a suffocating, ink-black void. Survivors later described a terrifying phenomenon. The disembodied voices. Because you couldn't see anything. You couldn't tell who was screaming. You couldn't tell if the person crying for help was 5 feet away or 50 feet away. The acoustics of the ruin played tricks on the mind. Sheriff Jordan, the man we saw blown out of his house, wakes up. He is lying in a field. He is battered. He is bleeding. But he is alive. He tries to stand up, but his equilibrium is gone. The pressure drop has messed with his inner ear. He stumbles. He crawls. He reaches into his pocket for a match. He finds one. He strikes it. Pfft. The flame flares up for a second. What he sees in that brief flicker of light breaks him. He isn't in a field. He is in the middle of what used to be the town square. But there is nothing there. The buildings are flat. It looks like a landfill. It looks like a garbage dump that stretches for miles. The match burns his fingers. He drops it. Darkness returns. He begins to shout, "Is anyone there?" And from the darkness, hundreds of voices answer him. "Help me! I'm trapped. My legs, I can't feel my legs." This is the psychological horror of the aftermath. You are surrounded by your neighbors, your friends, the people you bought coffee from that morning, but you cannot see them. You can only hear their agony. People began to scavenge for light. A flashlight here, a kerosene lantern there. Tiny pinpricks of yellow light began to bob in the darkness, like fireflies in a graveyard. They moved slowly over the piles of lumber. When two lights met, the survivors would embrace. They would weep, and then they would keep digging. They were digging for their children. There is a story of a father, a rancher, who found his house leveled. He spent 4 hours moving heavy timber beams in the freezing rain. Guided only by the sound of his daughter's voice singing a hymn underneath the rubble. He dug until his fingernails were torn off. He dug until his hands were raw meat. He pulled her out. She was unhurt. The bathtub had flipped over her and protected her like a cocoon. But for every miracle, there were 10 tragedies. Rocksprings is isolated. Remember the geography? The fortress on the hill. The phone lines are dead. The telegraph lines are snapped. The radio tower is a twisted heap of metal. No one outside of Rocksprings knows that the town has been destroyed. San Antonio doesn't know. Uvalde doesn't know. The world is sleeping. If help is going to come, someone has to go get it. This brings us to the hero run. A man named Babe Mims, a local, manages to find a car that still works. A Ford Model T. The windshield is smashed, the roof is dented, but the engine turns over. Crank, crank. Chug, chug, chug. He loads 2 injured people into the back seat. He has to get to Camp Wood. It is the nearest town with a telephone connection to the outside world, but the road to Camp Wood is not a highway. It is a treacherous, winding dirt track that snakes down the side of the escarpment. It is steep. It has no guardrails. And tonight, it is covered in debris. Mims hits the gas. He has one headlight working. The beam cuts through the rain. He is driving blind. He is dodging fallen trees. He is driving through hail drifts that are still melting on the road. If he slides off the edge, he falls 1,000 feet into the canyon. He drives like a madman. He knows that every minute he wastes is a minute that someone back in Rocksprings bleeds to death. He pushes the Model T to its limit. The tires slip in the mud. The car fishtails toward the cliff edge. He corrects it. He keeps going. He reaches Camp Wood just before midnight. He bursts into the telephone exchange. He is soaked. He is covered in mud. He looks like a ghost. The operator looks up, terrified. Mims screams, "Rocksprings is gone! Send everything! Send doctors! Send coffins!" The operator plugs in the line. Click, click, click. The message goes out. Calling Uvalde, calling San Antonio, emergency. Rocksprings has been destroyed. Repeat. Rocksprings has been destroyed. That message, traveling at the speed of light down the copper wires, wakes up the state of Texas. In Uvalde, the fire alarm rings. In San Antonio, the Red Cross is mobilized. Doctors grab their bags. Nurses jump into trucks. The cavalry is coming. But they have to drive up the mountain, and the storm is still raging in the valley. It will take them hours to get there. Back in Rocksprings, it is 2 a.m. The survivors have realized that no help is coming immediately. They have to save themselves. They need a central location, a place to put the wounded. The only large building left partially standing is the schoolhouse basement and the shattered remains of the Connell warehouse. They turn the warehouse into a triage center, but there are no lights, there are no painkillers, there are no bandages, there is no clean water. Picture the scene. It is a scene from the Civil War, not the 20th century. Men use door frames as stretchers. They carry the injured in from the rain. They lay them on the floor. The injuries are horrific. We are talking about compound fractures, head trauma from flying bricks, impaled objects. The local doctor, Dr. J.S. West, is a hero in this story. He survived the storm. His bag was blown away. His clinic is gone. He works with a pocket knife and a bottle of whiskey he found in the rubble. He moves from patient to patient. He has to make decisions that no human being should ever have to make. The triage. He looks at a man with a crushed chest. He checks the pulse. It is thready. He looks at the man's wife, standing there, covered in mud, begging him to do something. Dr. West shakes his head. "I'm sorry," he whispers. "I can't save him. Make him comfortable." He moves to the next person, a child with a broken leg. "This one," he says, "splint it. Keep him warm." He plays God by lantern light. The sounds in that warehouse haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The groans, the prayers, the sound of rain on the tin roof, and the cold. Always the cold. People take off their own coats, coats they desperately need to cover the dying. It is an act of ultimate sacrifice. You are dying, but you shouldn't have to die cold. By 4 a.m., the first headlights appear on the horizon. The rescue convoy from Uvalde, when those lights swept across the ruins, survivors said it looked like angels descending. But what the rescuers saw looked like hell. The rescuers stepped out of their trucks and vomited. They had seen car accidents. They had seen fires. They had never seen a town that had been put through a blender. They began to load the wounded, ambulances, trucks, personal cars, anything with wheels. They ferried them down the mountain to the hospitals in the valley, but for many, it was too late. The sun rises on April 13th, the rain stops, the clouds break, the sky turns a brilliant, mocking blue, and for the first time, the people of Rocksprings can see what happened to them. This is the moment of true trauma, the reveal. When the sun hits the plateau, the scale of the destruction is finally visible. Rocksprings is flat. It looks like a giant hand has swept across a table and knocked all the toys onto the floor. The courthouse, the pride of the county, is a shell. The roof is gone, the clock tower is gone, the hotel is a pile of stones, the churches are splinters. But It's the details that are the most disturbing. Survivors walk through the streets like zombies. They are looking for their homes. But the streets are gone. The landmarks are gone. I lived on the corner of Main and Austin, a man says. But he can't find the corner. It's just a field of debris. They find strange, surreal sculptures created by the wind. A barber chair, heavy cast iron, sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the street, untouched. A car, wrapped around a tree trunk at a 90-degree angle, 10 feet off the ground. A piece of straw, driven through a glass window pane without shattering the glass. And then, they find the bodies. 74 people are dead. 1/3 of the town's population is either dead or critically injured. Think about that ratio. 1 in 3. Every family has lost someone, or they know someone who has. The town hall is converted into a temporary morgue. But there aren't enough coffins. Rocksprings has a carpenter, but his shop is destroyed, and he can't build 74 coffins in a day. So they send for help. Towns from all over Texas send coffins. They come by train to the valley, and then by truck up the mountain. Simple pine boxes. The funerals begin. There are so many dead that they cannot dig individual graves fast enough. The ground is rocky, hard limestone. They have to dig trenches. Families stand by the open earth. They are still wearing the muddy, torn clothes from the night before. They haven't slept. They haven't eaten. They lower the boxes into the ground. There is no music. There is no pomp. Just the sound of the wind, whistling over the empty plateau. The same wind that killed them now sings their elegy. This brings us to the question that everyone was asking. Why? Why Rocksprings? Why that night? This is where we need to put on our investigator hats. Meteorologists have studied the 1927 Rocksprings tornado for decades. It is considered a textbook example of a multi-vortex F5. We now know that the green sky was the key. That green color is caused by sunlight filtering through massive amounts of ice and water vapor in the cloud. It indicates an incredibly tall, incredibly dense storm tower. The energy required to lift that much water, miles into the sky, is astronomical. When the cap broke, the updraft was explosive. It sucked the air from the surface up into the stratosphere like a vacuum cleaner. This created the pressure drop, and the friction, the glow. That was the triboelectric effect. Millions of dust particles smashing into each other at 200 miles per hour created a static charge that lit the funnel up like a neon sign. But the real culprit was the geography. The myth that tornadoes can't climb mountains was proven dead wrong. In fact, the elevation might have made it worse. The updraft caught the moist air rising up the slope of the plateau and used it like a ramp. The mountain didn't stop the storm. It fed it. It acted like a turbocharger. Rocksprings was the victim of a perfect, tragic geometric alignment. The debris analysis tells another story. We found checks from the bank in towns over 100 miles away. This tells us the residence time of the debris in the cloud was huge. Objects were sucked up, held in the clouds for hours, carried across the state, and then dropped. It is a reminder that the atmosphere is a fluid. It is an ocean of air, and we are just crabs living on the bottom of it. Sometimes, the ocean gets angry. So, what happened to Rocksprings? Did it die? Almost. In the weeks after the storm, there was talk of abandoning the town. It's cursed, people said. Why build it back just to have it blown down again? Many people left. They packed what little they had and moved down to the valley, to Uvalde, to San Antonio. They couldn't handle the wind anymore. Every time the wind blew, they would shake. It was PTSD, before we had a name for it. But some stayed. The Mohair Capital had a stubborn heart. They rebuilt the courthouse. You can see it today. It looks different, but it stands on the same foundation. They rebuilt the bank. They replanted the trees. But Rocksprings never fully recovered. The population never reached those golden age numbers again. The boom was over. The bubble had burst. Quite literally. If you go there today, you will feel it. It is a quiet town, a peaceful town. But there is a scar. There is a memorial in the town square, a stone marker. It lists the names, 74 of them, whole families, the Whitakers, the Millers, the Davises. It stands as a testament to the night the sky fell. We started this story by saying that Texas likes its legends loud, but the legend of the Rocksprings tornado is quiet. It is a whisper. It is a reminder that no matter how high we build our walls, no matter how much money we put in our vaults, no matter how safe we think we are guests here. We are guests on this planet, and sometimes the landlord comes to collect. April 12th, 1927, the day the wind erased a town, and the night the town refused to stay erased. What would you do when the train comes and there are no tracks?